Well, good morning and welcome back to the shop. Well, I'm back indoors again. The garage door is closed, the heater's on. I mean, we had 3 beautiful days up here in Canada and those days are gone. We're back to a regular March day. It's dreary, rainy, a little cool outside, but at least not minus 19 degrees. Well, as you can see, the car is back on the ground. All of the panels are on. The entire car is covered in 2K. Now, I'm kind of ready to start doing the final body work and final flattening, where I'd be using guide coat, etc. But you know what? That's all going to wait because I've got a lot of other things I want to get done to the car, and I might as well do them while I'm not worried about the paint or the finish, right? Why would I get the 2K ready for paint and then come along and start doing something? Now you'll also notice it is down on its suspension, but certainly the gaps between the wheel and the wheel wells are way larger. Now again, I know there's a lot of stuff that has to go back in the car. The seats are like 50 or 60 pounds each. The roof itself is like 100 and something pounds. So I'm not going to sweat the gaps yet. Even though I did do the Shelby drop and it doesn't look like it really dropped a lot. Again, there's a lot of sprung weight that is not on the car. But in order to just cover all my bases, what I did do is when I ordered the transmission mount for this vehicle, as I mentioned to you before, the automatic transmission mount is now being used to hold up the T5. It's certainly not in the right position, but it's holding it up. I ordered that at the same time I ordered a rear end lowering kit. To lower the rear end, all you need to do is put a shim or a spacer between the spring and the rear end, and they sell a kit. It's like $39. It'll drop the car an inch, and I figured, you know what, let's order that just in case, because I really would like to tuck these wheels up. I'd like to make this more, the car a lot lower. I'd like to have the same rubber around all 4 corners. I'd like to have the same thickness around all 4 corners, almost like a rally car, get it down to the ground, get the tires all matched around it. But that's just my vision, and again, that's something I want to do. So before I get started on the engine, before I get started on the electrical, I had to get the clutch in. I wanted to test this clutch. I wanted to make sure that when I pressed my foot on that clutch pedal, it worked. So there was a couple of interesting things I discovered, and there was a couple of things that some of the history I had back in the my old 68, back in the late 70s, experience with the clutch and challenges I had the clutch made me modify the clutch mechanism. So if you're interested in watching, here's a video on what I did for the clutch. Now, I changed it. I didn't like the way it was, and a lot of that was based on my experience with my original 68 back in the late 70s. And I think what I ran into back then is exactly what would have happened if I would have left it the way they wanted me to put it together. So actually I changed it. And as always, my videos are about what is different than what you can see everywhere else. So let's take a look. I released the clip on the other side that holds the clutch pivot shaft. I was able to move the shaft away so that now I can travel the foot pedal beyond the end of the play here. And now, of course, this grabs onto it. And of course now I'm going to be able to grab this and pop it down. So yes, I do clean my bench up once in a while. Sorry about that. As I'm assembling the clutch mechanism, I started really taking a look at this. This is the clutch rod, right? So this part here connects onto the bottom of the Z-bar, and the Z-bar pushes this forward, and this goes against the clutch fork. So I'm thinking to myself, what could possibly go wrong with a pointed piece of metal being continuously pushed against another piece of metal? What could go wrong? And I remember now, back in the 70s when I had that 68 Mustang, it actually didn't have this pointy thing. What it had was a rounded cup at the end that was adjustable, and the rod actually went through the clutch fork. The clutch fork had a hole in it large enough for the threaded rod. There was a nut on this side. There was like a half-rounded piece of metal that actually sat in the cup, and it was, of course, greased. And then the rod protruded out the other side, and on the other side was a nut, and that would absolutely stop any possibility that this could just fall out of the clutch fork. I'm actually taking a stove bolt, and what I've done is I've rounded the end of the stove bolt over. I will take a cutoff wheel and cut the end of the stove bolt off, so that gives me this nice rounded area, and then I will drill a hole in it, which is big enough for the threaded rod, and then that will go on. The rod can then protrude through the clutch fork. This large surface area now will run inside of the cup that's on the clutch fork, and I will never have a problem. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how long does it take for a sharp piece of metal to work its way through another piece of metal after being used all the time? So I was thinking about it. If I just drill this out so that I can get the threaded rod through, I'm going to have to put a nut here, and that nut can't move because the adjustment of the rod is actually done by moving the threaded rod and by releasing the bolts that are back by the Z-bar. So this can't move. So what do I have to do? I can put this on, put a nut behind it so it doesn't move, and then maybe weld that nut in place. And then I was thinking to myself, well, if I have it apart to this point anyways, well, why don't I just drill the hole and then tap the hole? That way that this will thread on to the threaded rod. I can have a nut which will then lock this in place. That way there it's not permanent. And what I mean by that is if anything goes wrong in the future and I need to effect repairs, if I welded this on or if I did something to make sure that this doesn't move, I would be unable to reuse it. So just thinking ahead, I figured why not? I have the tap and die. Let me just tap this, and then that way this will spin onto the rod. A locking nut can lock it in place, and then all the adjustment will be done at the Z-bar like it normally does. But the good news is that it can all be taken apart if necessary. Now, of course, very easy to do the final shaping. All I do is I take a rod, put it on there, and I can take it to the grinder. I can clean this up. I can make sure that that's the angle I want. I can do a couple of test fits. And this way here now we're going to have this nice cup in cup, and I'm not going to worry about this falling out. Well, I hope you don't think this is overkill. Again, so there is my nice little rounded washer, so that will sit right in the ball, like a ball and socket. I use a very thick. This is for where you do like the brakes, the rear brakes, and where you have metal rubbing against each other inside the brake shoes. I use this. It's very thick. It doesn't run. It's high temperature. So that's what I've been using. I know I've been saying lithium the last couple of days or last couple of videos, but this is what I meant. And so I'm going to put that on this. That way there, the ball and socket will never have a problem. Secondly, this will never fall out because this, of course, is going to protrude through, and there will never ever be enough slack that this could pull all the way out for this to fall out. And then again, like I said, the standard adjustment here. So I can put this in, spin the rod, get it to the proper adjustment I want, lock it in place, and I'm done. Okay, so obviously there's the clutch fork, there's the Z-bar. As I said, I've already lubricated the end of this, so this will go through here. And that sits beautifully in that socket, right? So that's never going anywhere. Now, as far as this now rod can adjust. So we're going to screw that in. There we go. So now that is in the Z-bar, as you can see. Now remember, I'm not going to permanently assemble this. I am waiting for new bushings for this. So this needs a bushing in here. So what I'm going to do is just simply take a clip and just temporarily put the clip in just to kind of hold it in place. There we go. So that'll just kind of hold it. But now I can adjust this by simply spinning the rod, and that'll either tighten it or it'll loosen it. And I can now make the adjustments here. And then again, like I said, the spring that normally went across this to hold it together, what I'm actually using it now for is part of the return. I've now moved it over onto the engine. That way that it'll constantly pull the fork that way, which means it'll make sure that the throwout bearing is never sitting up against the clutch. So instead of being across here, I prefer it here. And that way there now I don't have to worry about this falling apart. So now you can see the whole assembly, right? So there is the new threaded rod that's going down to the throwout, to the clutch fork. The Z-bar is installed, as I mentioned earlier. It bolts to the side of the engine block. As you can see right here, that's where it's bolted to the side of the engine block. And then on this side here, there's a bracket that's been installed. That bracket you see there, that is where it connects to the frame. That bracket pivots, that allows you to then pivot it out of the way, insert the Z-bar into the pin on the block, and then of course on the other end. And then of course in here, what you have, and very difficult to see, is you've got the bar that runs for the clutch. You can just see it right there. And simply put, the rod obviously comes through the firewall. It connects on to the clutch. There we go. And you know what? That's actually, if I can do that with my left arm, I'm quite sure I can do that with my leg. Now that's not adjusted. I've got some slack here. We have to take care of that slack. We want to make sure that once I start pressing the clutch right from this position down, that it engages. So it's a fine balance between making sure that the throwout bearing is not touching the clutch, but also that the throwout bearing is close enough that when you start to press the clutch, it actually puts the clutch in. But like I said, I can feel that disengaging the clutch, and that's beautiful. So there's there's a great action on that. So like I said, I got to wait for that bushing, but other than that, the clutch installation is finished. So what a surprise, Wally over-engineered something. But basically, I still believe back in the late 70s with that original 68, that rod I'm describing, and again, I'm going back 40 years in my memory, I believe that's what it was. But basically, when you take a look at, that was certainly not stock, but I think it solved a problem. And it was a problem that was created over time with that clutch rod jamming up against the clutch fork. So in this case now, I don't have to worry about two problems. Problem number one, that falling out. It's not going to fall out ever because it goes through. In fact, like I said, I could put a nut on the other side and physically make them connected. The other thing that, again, is it's not going to wear through. I mean, anytime you take a sharp end and put it against something and constantly push it, it's going to wear. Mine is not. Again, like I said, when you come to this workshop, there's always something a little different, unique maybe. So what's next? Let's bolt stuff onto this engine. Let's start putting the alternator on. Let's start putting the pulleys on. I've got an air conditioning compressor that's got to go on. I got some hoses that got to be run. So I got some stuff to do under the hood to keep me busy. Electrical. Well, I might as well start putting in all the electrical, right? My delay box, the fuse box, run all the lines. Again, bring all the lines up to the fenders, get all the lights all connected up, make sure all that works. As you know, I'm going to LEDs, which are wired slightly different than the regular bulb, so I got to be cognizant of that. So I'm going to be doing all of that. I might as well get it all done and in and tested while it's still in primer, because if I hurt a panel, who cares? I can fix it and reprime it, so there's no big deal there. I've got to drill my doors because the electrical to go in for the power windows has got to go through. I've got to get power to my power seats. I've got to get power to my power roof. So like I said, lots of stuff to do. So that's just a taste of the videos that are coming up. I think today I'm just going to do the engine, something a little simple. Let's bolt things on. I can do that pretty well without hopefully too much of a challenge, but you never know around this shop. So until then, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And as I said, until then, thanks for joining.